Hey everyone, thanks for joining in for our webinar, Creating the Ultimate Cloud Native Development Experience. This is going to be a really fun webinar about something which is very close to both of ours heart, and that is development experience and in general development experience related to cloud native apps, because that is something which has been like a hot topic recently. Like our team was at KubeCon. I don't know if any of the attendees were at KubeCon, but I'd love to hear if you have the same opinion. But everyone seemed to be talking about DevX and platform engineering from what I heard. And that's why I feel like this is going to be very relevant. And we have some content where we'll show you some Okteto features which can really improve the development experience if you're working on microservices or cloud native applications. I'm Arsh Sharma. I work as a developer experience engineer at Okteto, and I'm joined with my friend David here. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dave Cash. I'm a solutions architect here at Okteto.
All right. So I'll bring up my screen and we'll just get right into it because we have lots of cool features to show you. Before we get started, I just want to quickly quickly tell what Okteto is about. So Okteto is a platform for dev experience automation. So we have talked about dev experience, but what Okteto does is it allows you as platform engineers to automate that in a way that you're able to provide this better development experience while not having to manually control things or do things for the developers. So we provide production like cloud dev environments which developers can spin up in one click and develop their applications in, and we allow you to get right to the code writing phase and allow you to use the same tools you use in production, be it Helm, Terraform, or whatnot. David, would you
Yeah, I
like to
love
add
that
anything
about
to? Yeah.
yeah, I love that about Okteto. It gives you a work experience where you have all your microservices working together. So when you make that change, you get that immediate feedback. You're not waiting for 20 minutes for CI to run before you can see what that change looks like. It gives you the experience of developing in a single application, even though in today's world, our full applications have multiple microservices in it. That's what I love about Okteto.
Yeah. And what this webinar is going to be about is three Okteto features which we feel are key if you're looking to improve the development experience in your org. The first one of them is external resources. I'll let David explain what they are, and then I'll touch a bit upon why they are important and what problem they solve.
Yeah, so external research. So when you're building your application, a lot of applications have dependencies on services that are outside of the cluster. For example, your application might have an RDS database or an SNS cloud service. And what external resources does is it allows you to build those resources in your cloud, and it will be able to be used inside your namespace, inside your application, as a part of your total application. And then it's ephemeral in that when you destroy your environment, the external resources go out and get cleaned up as well, all from Okteto.
Yeah, and the value is in the fact that as we start to use more of these cloud services, like David mentioned, databases or storage buckets, the question becomes that when your developers are developing the applications, how do they get access to these services, right? Because you're using them in production, but if you ask someone to work on an application and that application uses a storage bucket, then how can you expect that developer to be able to write code without that bucket actually being there? And the way organizations often try to solve this is by asking developers to go to that AWS console and create the bucket themselves, which I feel is not a good development experience for the developers, because one, it increases the cognitive load on the developers. Now they have to learn AWS, which is very scary. If you've ever visited the console, that's something you do not want your developers to be dealing with. And secondly, it also creates a problem for platform engineers, because these developers who are mostly inexperienced with AWS, when they go and create resources, and AWS is I'm just taking one name, but it could be any cloud provider. But when these developers go and create resources, they might not be following the best practices, right? They might not be creating these resources in a region where you want them to create, or they might not be using the right IAM roles or permissions, which could interfere with your compliance policies. That is why it is extremely important to be able to automate this process in a way which gives governance to platform engineers, while at the same time solve this problem for developers where they can focus on writing code instead of having to worry about creating these resources. And the best part
That's
about
an
external resources, sorry.
That's an excellent point, Arsh. And just to add on top of that, we're also focused on building environments that you're developing in that are close to prod. So
Exactly.
if you have an S3 bucket that is required in your application, and to be able to fully see that application work needs that S3 bucket or RDS, then we want you to be as close to prod as possible when you're doing the development.
Yep. And that close to prod part also, we make it easy because we allow you to leverage the same scripts, the same tools you use to create that bucket in prod. So if you're using Terraform to create that bucket, you can leverage that same script during development as well, making it easy for you to provide access to that resource. So don't worry about this if it feels like too much. We'll see a demo where all of this will come together and it'll make so much more sense. The second feature, which I think it's safe to say it's one of David and mine favorite features about Okteto, and that's live endpoints. So, David, would you like to just give a brief about what they are?
Yeah, and we'll see in the demo, but the live endpoints are the actual application running in total with all the dependencies. So it is where I think the magic happens in Octeto, in that as soon as you make the change, it changes in the application, which changes in the endpoint. You get that immediate feedback loop. You can see the change you made without having to wait for CI to run. This all happens even before you commit your code to Git. All of it happens live and instantaneous. It hot reloads your app. It's great.
Yep. So when you deploy, when any developer deploys their development environment, they get endpoints for their applications where or any change they make on their code editor gets hot reloaded and shown to them at that endpoint. And that's one nice feature. Just the immediate feedback alone is a game changer because it allows developers to see the whole application instantly. But the other cool part is that since this is an endpoint, you can configure it in a way that it can be shared with people in your organization. So you can send it to different teams, be it product, design, marketing, and get feedback from them. And usually, the way people approach this feedback is they'll once like a particular set of commits or features have been done, like once a release has been cut, they put it in staging and then they share the endpoints with the different stakeholders, like different non-engineering stakeholders like product teams or designers, and then they get feedback. That really just delays the process and increases the software delivery life cycle, because that means when you get that feedback you have to go through that process again of developers writing code and then creating a new release. Whereas with these endpoints, as you'll see, as soon as you write code, hit save, you can see your change at an endpoint and you can just Slack it or whatever internal communication tool you use, send it to your teammates and they can give you immediate feedback.
Yeah.
The
I
third
think uh, before we leave off of
Yeah.
endpoints, I think it's important to say that over the last 8 years, we've made so much advancement in the DevOps, DevGitOps, DevSecOps, in compliance, and how to do merge request approvals or pull request approvals. But in that process, developers have to make a change and then end up waiting 20 minutes for their environments to build before they can even see if the change they made is exactly what they wanted to see. And maybe that color yellow is not the right color yellow, the hue. Maybe the button is in, just needs to be moved over a millimeter over to the right or to the left. And they can't see how that looks in the application until it builds in CI, they get their environment, and then they can see it. So with those endpoints, they get that immediate feedback. They can immediately see if that's the right color yellow, if that's the right placement of the button, and then by the time they make a commit, they're not only putting through higher quality commits, but they have the application in the state that they want it in.
Yeah. Before we move towards the third feature, I would just like to say that we have a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write there. There's a general chat section as well. So just feel free to write whatever you want to ask, and we'll get to that as soon as we are done with this section. So the third feature is sharing namespaces. And this feature really is like very important because as we all know, like with microservices based applications, no one person knows about all the different microservices, right? They are written in different languages, different frameworks, and expecting one person to know everything is just not realistic. So collaboration ends up becoming the backbone of when you're creating a microservices based application. And while live endpoints help with that, the other cool feature is sharing namespaces. So let's say a developer David is working on microservice A and they need assistance or they need something changed in microservice B because these two microservices interact with each other. They typically have two options. They can ask developer Tom, who is knowledgeable about microservice B, to make the necessary modifications. But when Tom has to do that, they'll first have to pull David's changes. And for David to do that, like David will have to push the changes, then Tom will have to pull them. Tom will make their own change. Tom will push that, and David will pull. And all in all, it's just really messy and it's inconvenient, time consuming. It's a frustrating experience, I can say, because I've experienced this in organizations and it's not fun to work with. The other way is you can ask someone to engage in a pair programming session and guide you through code changes via synchronous communication. While it is a good approach, it can be challenging to consistently execute it due to factors like time zone and availabilities. So, to solve this problem, sharing namespaces really comes into the picture. And this is something we'll show you and it'll make a lot of sense then. David, is there something you'd like to add for about this feature?
No, I'm excited to show this one though. This is
Yeah.
really unique to Okteto.
See. Yeah. Cool. So with that, let's go to the demo and let's actually see these features in action so you can understand how you can leverage them. I'll bring down this screen and bring up my Octeto instance. Awesome. So you see, with Octeto, each developer gets access to as many namespaces as they want, and they can choose to have one namespace per application, per feature, per bug they are solving. And I've created this new namespace called webinar to-do list. And in this namespace, I can choose to deploy my application. So I can just select my application, and all of this is pre-configured by the platform team. For the developers, it is almost like magic. They just have to come, click launch, and their environment will start getting deployed. Now this will take a minute or two, and to skip that, I have this application already deployed. But if you see, during the deployment of this application, it runs these steps where it's building the microservices and creating the AWS S3 bucket. So if you go back and read the instructions here, you can see that it is running like Terraform scripts, like it is running Terraform in it, because when configuring this application, I just use the same Terraform script I would use in production to create my resource, and it's leveraging that to create the resource this application needs. Coming to this application, it's like a to-do list application with a slight modification where it'll allow you to save your to-dos. So if I say take the dog for a walk, I can add my to-do and then I can click the save button and you'll see it says to-dos backed up. Now these to-dos are being backed up in an S3 bucket. So developers need access to that bucket if they are to, test this functionality, or when they were adding this functionality, they needed that bucket to be actually able to see if things are working or not. And for that, I added an S3 bucket as an external resource. And that's why it was created for me during the provisioning of this dev environment, like we saw. So in this namespace also, we run the create AWS S3 bucket step where we use the Terraform script to create the bucket. And here I can see the endpoint where I can actually access the bucket itself. And if we go here, we see that our to-dos are exported and backed up in a JSON file. How cool is that? As a developer, I did not have to configure any IAM roles. I did not have to go to the console to create the bucket. All I did was just launch a dev environment and all of this got created for me. And the credentials needed to create this can be configured on a cluster basis for the entire dev cluster if you want, or they can be configured on an per developer basis as well. So really it gives you the flexibility to govern the resources and the environment in any way you want as a platform engineer, while taking away the trouble of managing this from the developers. And this was about external resources, and these endpoints are the second feature which we really love, because these allow you to see any changes you make to your application. So if you see this name Okteto to do, I find it really hard to pronounce. I don't know if that's the case with you all as well. And I want David to change it. And I'm not really a front end person. I don't like doing anything related to front end. So I want his help. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this namespace with him. So we'll both be able to collaborate. So I'll click the share button and I'll search for David's name and I'll invite him to my namespace. Now, let me stop my screen share and bring up David's screen so we can see how things look on his side.
Okay, so if I go
Just a second.
to,
I think your screen is not up. Perfect.
so I'm in my namespace right now. As Arch has shared his with me, this just popped into my work environment. So now I could go directly uh, to Arch's work environment. And I see here's the service.
And the best part is that David did not have to redeploy or create a new bucket or anything like that. And that really matters if your application has a lot of microservices, because it saves time and you can instantly collaborate.
So I will quickly do an Octeto up.
You'll have to set the context and the namespace.
Okay. So I'm going to set my context to Arch's Octeto.
I think David's like context file got corrupted, so he's just creating a
Yeah,
new one, and
remaking it.
you can like you saw like in the UI, you can just download a new context file in case this happens.
Okay, there we go.
And then he'll switch to my namespace. You're doing an up in your
Oh,
namespace.
you're right.
So like we saw in David's screen, he had access to a default namespace which gets created for each developer. But in this case, he wants to launch an Okteto up session into my namespace, which is called to-do list. And what launching an Okteto up session basically means is it means replacing the container running for a service with a dev container. And what's special about this dev container is that it will sync the code which David will change on his local machine with the code which gets run in the container and hence in the cluster. So whatever changes David ends up making on his machine, we'll see reflected on that endpoint. And right now, for the purposes of this webinar, we have kept these endpoints public. So I'll just drop the link just because I feel it's like I want to show you that this is live. So I'll drop the link in the chat and you can go there and you will see the change which David makes, and all of us will be able to see it. And this is my dev environment and David is making the change because I have invited them. So in the public chat, I have just dropped the link. So if you all visit this, you will be able to access the to-do list application and you'll be able to see the change. So David will choose like in the client microservice because that's where the front end is. No, it's in the component section. Input to dos.
Yep, right here.
In the input to do file, you're in the app.js file. So you can see the line of the code where the name of the application is.
Right here. Okay, so
You'll have to,
yep.
I think you forgot to choose the service, yeah. So once like this application only had a client and server microservice, but these could be as many services as you want. And once you select the service, it will replace the container. And the fun part is that if David is a front-end developer and I were a back-end developer, I can launch another Okteto obsession into the server microservice. So I can work on the server simultaneously as David works on the client. And that really allows us both to collaborate in real time. And once we are happy with the end result, each of us can like push our changes to the same branch and see the end result of the entire application. So right now, like the dev container is launched, and
yep, we could go back here and we can actually see.
David just changed the name of that application to, I don't know, I guess we'll see. So if you just go to the endpoint, I think you forgot to save your file. Yeah.
Yeah, and saved it yet. All right, and it's hot reloading. And now, if we go to the endpoint,
We see
listed.
that the name of the application has changed, and I can like the endpoint I dropped in the chat. Anyone can go there, and you can see that this endpoint has changed. I so just imagine the possibilities with this. If you're working on a really complex application, it allows you to just work together without being dependent on like without having to anyone having to set up their own environment when they want to collaborate, because you can just share your environment and see their changes.
And one of the things is that this is all before the commit. So I have not committed this code. It's not in the Git repo. My changes lay on my local file system. If Arsh is making changes to another microservice, his changes are on his local file system. But together, they're built inside our shared work environment to see the changes, make them work, and then we can both commit our changes when we're happy collaborating and we've made all the changes that we want to make, and then it could go through CI or go to the next stage.
Awesome. So this was what we had for the demo. Any questions on the demo or any of these features?
There
I
are
think
some
some
questions in the
questions.
Q&A.
Yeah. One of the questions is what external resources are supported.
So we support pretty much anything that can run off of a terminal. In our example, we were using Terraform. You could pull a Terraform image and you can run Terraform directly. That could be said for most configuration managements. for that matter. So in all three of the main cloud environments, they have um, different CLIs that can be run, or you could use something like Terraform or some other uh, cloud cloud management system to build services and resources.
Yeah, so really, like anything with you can create, you want to create, that can be provisioned because you can use the same scripts and all of that becomes a part of your dev environment. So the flexibility for you is there to choose the resources. Another question I see by Dan is, do changes made by the second developer get synced down to the first developer's local machine? So no, the changes won't get synced down to the developer's local machine, but they'll be able to see it on the endpoint reflected because they would be getting pulled by the second developer's dev container and their local machine, but they won't be made available on the first developer's local machine unless you commit and like do that.
Yeah. And then another
Um,
question: are the endpoints public to see for anyone? So they are as public as you want to make your cluster. So if you require a VPN to get into your cluster, and and that's the only way to get to the endpoints, then that would be the way to do that. Otherwise, yes, they could be made public for everyone. If you needed to share it with, we have we have people that use Okteto to demo their services, and they'll just give the endpoints of their application directly to their customers, and then they can pull that up as well. So both are supported. One would be locking down your cluster into a VPC that requires a VPN into, or something like this, and then the other would be to have it open and for everyone.
cool. Any other questions? Because if not, I think we can end the webinar. And do I have to commit my changes for the other person to see them? No, like you saw, David did not commit his changes, but we were able to see them on the endpoint as soon as he hit save. But coming back to Dan's question, if I want these changes as on my local machine, then the commit needs to be made. So we can both see the end result, but we can't get the changes from the other person unless you commit and pull them to your machine. Um, any other questions? Awesome. It looks like there are no questions, but if you have any questions, we'll post the recording of this webinar and we'll follow up with everyone on email. If you have any questions, you can reply on that email or you can reach out to us on our website, community.okteto.com. I hope you found this webinar useful. If you did, we have a free 30-day trial of Okteto. So if you want to sign up, you can click the Try Okteto button, which you should see on your screen. And over this 30-day trial, you'll be able to try out Okteto on your own cluster and see these features we have shown you. So what I would encourage you is try out. We'll send you the link for the sample app we deployed, and just try deploying this app for yourself because it has everything configured and it should give you a good starting point to get started with external resources, live endpoints, and sharing namespaces, and just experience Okteto and see how it can help you create a better dev experience for your developers. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you found this useful.
Yeah, thank you.